you. Well, I'm not as tall as you, Jeff. So, last week I talked about marriage, and after church, Pastor Jeff's wife came up to me, and she said, "You know what I learned during your sermon? That I married a really good man." And I just think that's, I know you can hear me wherever you are. That's high praise, so good job. Well, this morning is Father's Day. How many of you knew it was Father's Day? Did any of you not know it was Father's Day? If you didn't know, raise your hand. Okay, because at church last night, I said tomorrow's Father's Day, and some people were like, really? And I just think that's interesting, because, Mother's Day, no one can miss that, because for about 6 weeks, 1-800-Flowers, you need to send, Father's Day. What? We still celebrate that? But, yeah, see, that's my sister. She thinks it's funny. But today is Father's Day, and so I'm going to talk, well, actually, my title is The Knowledge of God, which is the title of the whole series out of Proverbs, taken from Proverbs chapter 2. But my specific title this morning is The Pride of Our Children. And that doesn't mean like our children are arrogant pride. What that is talking about is what Solomon wrote about in Proverbs chapter 17, verse 6. Children's children are a crown to the aged, and parents are the pride of their children. And literally, it's fathers, but it applies to mothers also. But think about this idea. You, as a parent, you, as a father, are the pride of your child. They look up to you. They love you. Little boys will say, my dad can beat up your dad. Well, my dad does this. Well, my dad. Parents are the pride of their children. But here's a trap that we fall into. I saw a cartoon once, I think it was a family circle, and there's a little boy down by his bed, and he's praying, "Dear God, help me to grow up to be just like my dad." And then you see the dad beside his bed, and he says, "Dear God, help me to be the man that my son thinks I am." And because we know our own failures and weaknesses, we often vacate what they desperately need because we don't feel we're worthy of it. I can't be their pride. I have shortcomings and failures and secrets and brokenness. But scriptures tell us we are the pride of our children. And it doesn't really matter how messed up we are, they still need us. They need us. There was the movie Hoosiers from I think the 80s. Gene Hackman played the coach, and he took this little Indiana school, and they won the state championship. Well, there was a character in the movie played by Dennis Hopper. He was Shooter, that was his nickname, and he was the town drunk. And his boy was on the team. But Shooter knew basketball, and so Coach Gene Hackman, that's what I will call him, he went to Shooter, and he said, "I would like you to be an assistant coach." And later, the player said to his coach, Gene Hackman, "Why are you doing this? He's just gonna embarrass me. He's just gonna mess up." And through the course of this movie, you see, even though his dad was formerly the town drunk, he was in that boy's heart. And when they reconcile their relationship, he needs him. He needs him. And I will tell you, my dad, he was a good man, but he was a broken man. But as I think about my life, there's probably nobody that has influenced me as much as he has. It's what happens. And I want you parents to know this. Your children need you. And it doesn't matter how old they are or how old you are, they still need you. They need you. My dad passed away about 10 years ago. There are times I still think, what would Clemwell Jr. do? That was his name. See, that's not his name, you would say, why do you care what Clemwell Jr. would do? I still think that. Parents are the pride of their children. They're the thing that we look up to. And this is why it's so hurtful when parents are belittling and cruel. Because if your child needs you because you are his pride, and instead you continue to tell him how worthless he is, what do you have left? Children's children are the crown to the aged, and parents are the pride of their children. So I'm going to give you some examples throughout Proverbs, actually, and there's a couple other places in the Bible that we'll look at that just talk about how do we do this then? What does it look like? What does it look like? And the first passage you want to go to is Proverbs chapter 4. Now again, the book of Proverbs was written by Solomon, and he's talking about his dad when he says, this is what my father did. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 1, it says, "Listen, my sons, to a father's instruction." That's key. We're going to talk about instruction a few different times because it's in the book of Proverbs quite often. And think about what instruction is. Instruction is helping, it's encouraging, it's teaching. You take your little boy out and he's holding a bat for the first time. And you're like, "Okay, son, hold it like this. And put your hands together." This is actually a golf swing. Put your hands together. Now, okay, when the ball comes, you throw the knob. You throw the knob and you step forward and you put your weight on. Or you can say, "What's wrong with you? Can't you hit a ball?" And that's often how kids are taught. A couple of those options. In fact, often people who are raised with the second method, they become coaches in Little League. And they think, "I know how to help a 6-year-old get good. I will yell at him." Yes, every 6-year-old ever. Best. No, I'm just kidding. That is not a good way. And we're going to learn right here what David did. "Listen, my sons, to a father's instruction. Pay attention and gain understanding. I give you sound learning, so do not forsake my teaching. When I was a boy in my father's house, still tender." Still tender. Hasn't had time to get hardened by life yet. He's still tender. And think of this beautiful picture. There's little Solomon and King David. "When I was a boy in my father's house, still tender, and an only child of my mother, he taught me. And he said, lay hold of my words with all your heart. Keep my commands, and you will live. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or swerve from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you." This is what little baby Solomon was hearing from King David. "My son, listen, get wisdom. Listen to my words." And it took, because Solomon grew up to be the wisest man who ever lived until Jesus. Now, he didn't always live out his wisdom, but he gained wisdom. And here's David teaching him, gently instructing him while he is still tender. And this stuff takes hold. I was on a flight one time, flying down somewhere, I think Miami, and I'm sitting next to this guy, and we get talking, and he starts telling me about his life, and he was ridiculously successful. I don't remember exactly what he did. He was ridiculously successful. So then we talked a little bit about his family, and his sister was like a law professor at Harvard or something, and his brother-in-law was an attorney general somewhere. The whole family was ridiculously successful. And I was like, "How does this happen?" And he goes, "I remember being a kid, we would go on vacation down to Tampa Bay, and my dad would say, 'This is your assignment. Every day, I need you to go up to one of those old men smoking a cigar on the beach and ask them, how did they make their fortune?'" And I'm like, that's an interesting. But if you're a little boy and you're supposed to go up and say, "Excuse me, sir, my dad says I have to ask you how you made your fortune." And he's like, got a cigar. "Well, I'll tell you, black guy." But this was just instilled in him as a child. This idea that you can make a fortune, and you need to learn from others who have made a fortune, how they made their fortune. And this was the home he grew up in. And so he became some crazy successful guy. All the rest, these things were taught. Well, here's King David teaching Solomon about wisdom. And then in verse 7, now, This verse, the rest of the scriptures we look at today are taken from the 1984 NIV. This verse I took from the 2011 NIV because it's more accurate, plus I love the way it reads. Verse 7 says, "The beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom." I mean, you just hear David. Solomon, the beginning of wisdom is this. I don't think he had a cigar. The beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom. The beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom. And then look at what he says. Though it cost all you have, get understanding. And I'm just going to put in a plug for counseling. I know there are bad counselors. There are plenty of good counselors. And I know it costs money to go see a counselor. And it also says, though it cost all you have, get understanding. If there's something that you are stuck on, that you need help with, get wisdom. And if it means you pay someone to give you wisdom, though it cost all you have, get understanding. Esteem her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will set a garland of grace on your head and present you with a crown of splendor. This is what Solomon was hearing when he was still tender, the only son of his mother. You need to get wisdom. It will be a garland. Get understanding. It will be a crown that will grace you. So we instruct, but more than instructing, Gary Benedict, who, well, he was the district superintendent in Wisconsin. Then he eventually became the president of Crown College. And then he eventually became the president of the Christian Missionary Alliance. And he had quite a few sayings. And one of his sayings that I can't forget is this. He said, you teach what you know, you reproduce who you are. You teach what you know, you reproduce who you are. And so we need to make sure that we are creating an environment that is conducive to growth and wisdom and learning. In Proverbs 17, verse 1, it says, better a dry crust with peace and quiet than a house full of feasting with strife. And dads, you are the scariest thing in your house. You are. That's why they say, wait till your father gets home. You are the scariest thing in your house. It is in your hands whether it will be a house of peace or a house of strife. And Solomon says, if you have to choose a house of feasting where there's everything and strife, or some dry crust. I mean, think about dry crust. First of all, a lot of people don't even like crust. They cut it off of their sandwich. Well, not only are you not getting the good part of the bread, you're just getting the crust, and it's not even moist crust. It's dry crust. Better a dry... Now, moms, you have an awful lot to do with whether there's peace in the house, too. Because it's not just the dads that can be scary. But it's our job to create, don't you look at your mama. That's Thomas. Calling out Thomas. He'll never sit in the second row again. I'm just joking with you, Thomas. Anyway, we create this environment of peace where learning, where wisdom, where it's easy. In fact, you know what makes for a safe environment? The freedom to make a mistake and be allowed to. To just, hey, that's okay. We can't all do that right the first time. Boy, you're way better at pouring milk at 3 years old than I was. We create this safe environment. Proverbs 22, 24, and 25, it says, do not make friends with a hot-tempered man. Again, this is talking about the house of strife. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered man. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn his ways and get yourself ensnared. Children that grow up in an angry house have a pretty good chance of having an angry house of their own someday. Because we teach what we know and we reproduce what we are. And we just learn it. It just becomes, because you see, when you're teaching your boy how to hit a baseball, you're teaching him more than just how to hit a baseball. You're also teaching him when it's his time to teach someone to hit a baseball, here's how you do that too. Whatever we are doing, we're teaching our children, this is how you handle this situation. This is what you do when you come to a light and it's red. This is what you do when you're sitting at a light and the person in front of you isn't going. This is what you do when the cashier isn't paying attention and they're making you late at Quick Trip. This is how you handle it when toast burns. This is how you handle, and they watch and they learn and they want to be like you because parents are the pride of their children. See, I'm sure I've told you this before, but my dad, he used colorful language sometimes. And I remember I was like 5. I was playing basketball, and I didn't know how to play basketball, but I used colorful language too because that's what my dad did, and he's cool. And then my mom says, son, actually, you shouldn't use those words, but my dad does. Yeah, but he's your dad, and I don't have as much influence over him as I do over you. But I don't want to hear that talk anymore, okay? Because we want to be like our dads. And if we run a house that's wild, chaotic, angry, our kids are going to learn. That will be their normal, and it's how they're going to handle life. This is how you get things done. This is how you make things happen. In Proverbs 1, 8, and 9, instead, he talks about instructing again. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Like, I just have this picture of here's a boy trying to do something, and his dad's right behind him. He's like, that's good, that's good. No, a little bit more like this. Whatever, a little bit more. Nope, hold it like this. Oh, that's good, that's good. And this is instructing, and we instruct in life. We instruct on how to shave and how to, my dad taught me how to button up a shirt. He tricked me. This is what he said. My shirt buttons were all over the place. He said, I used to have buttons like that. And then, when I was a kid, I started always buttoning from the top button down, and I never missed a button. And now I'm an adult, and you know how I button my shirt? Like bottom up? Nope, I still do it top button down. And guess how I button my shirts? Yeah, the story wouldn't be any good if I said in the middle. It's top down. It's what I learned. It's instruction. Proverbs 22:6 says this, train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it. And this is telling us it's going to stick for life. There's a really good chance that the last time I ever button my shirt, it will be top button down. And I think about the things. In fact, sometimes I ask myself, why do I do that? And the answer I come back with is, oh yeah, because that's what my dad taught me. And it isn't just the stuff that he literally taught me. Again, it's the stuff that I just absorbed by watching him. The things that he valued, that I learned to value, because he valued them. How many kids are a fan of a sports team because their parents were? Or how many people have an allegiance to certain political affiliations or religious affiliations or the Lions Club because their parents were? We reproduce what we are. Proverbs 22:15. I threw this one in there because if your child misbehaves, don't be surprised. Solomon wrote in 22:15, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline will drive it far from him. Foolishness is in our hearts. We're born with it. But so often it seems that when children misbehave, parents are completely surprised. And they react as if, how did this possibly happen? I can't believe you did this. And it's like, oh wait, no, yeah, I know it's in your heart. Foolishness, because it was in my heart. We're born with it. And if we realize it's our job to take a baby that has foolishness in their heart by birth and instruct them and give them wisdom and teach them how to handle situations. Teach them how to become a mature, responsible, healthy adult. And they will make mistakes because foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. Now, children, I see you in the second row there. Do not go home and say, well, I have to misbehave because foolishness is in my heart. No, I'm not giving anyone permission to misbehave, but I'm just saying this is what it is. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. We ought not to be surprised by it. We work through it. We instruct. Proverbs 29:15, it says, the rod of correction imparts wisdom. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about correction. I'm not anti-spanking. I was spanked plenty as a child. I'm also not saying spanking is necessarily the best. And I think if you have any type of anger problem, it's probably good to not. Because, yeah, you don't want, it's just not pretty when there's a little helpless child and a big angry dad. That's a bad mismatch. I know that's how Adrian Peterson was raised, but it's a bad mismatch. But we do correct. We do correct. We do guide. He says, again, the rod of correction imparts wisdom, but a child left to himself disgraces his mother. Proverbs 29:17, discipline your son, and he will give you peace. I mean, think about this. This boy, he grows up, and he becomes the kind of man that you hoped he would be. And what kind of peace is in your heart then? Because you know he's going to make good life choices. He's not going to be out destroying himself and destroying others. He's going to be walking with the wise and continuing to grow wise, and your heart will be at peace. But about discipline, I want to go to the book of Hebrews to talk about discipline. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 5 through 7, it says, And you have forgotten that word of encouragement that addresses you as sons. My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes everyone he accepts as a son. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as sons. For what son is not disciplined by his father? So the author of Hebrews, and he's quoting other scriptures, he says, if you are God's child, he will discipline you. And be encouraged by that, because it means he loves you, because he loves those he disciplines. And so endure hardship as discipline. And you're like, okay, I'm going to be disciplined. God loves me. When he disciplines me, it doesn't mean that God doesn't love me. It actually means he does love me, because he wants better for me, and he's trying to teach me. So here's the question I ask to all of you. How has God disciplined you? How has God disciplined you? And the most basic and generally true answer is he allows you to suffer the consequences for the bad choices you make. See, he doesn't come in and spank you or scold you or put you in a timeout. He just says, I told you not to do that, and you did it. Okay? Enjoy. That's what we read throughout the Old Testament. He tells Israel, worship me. Don't worship the idols of foreign countries. And they give themselves over and over and over. And so he says, okay, you like the Babylonians so much? Have the Babylonians. See what it's really like to be under Babylonian rule. You like the gods of the Philistines? See what it's like to have the Philistines dominate you for 40 years. And that's generally how we are disciplined. We are given wisdom. We are told, my son, listen to my instruction. Do these things. And we say, no, and then consequences happen. So somehow, in parenting, we need to find out how to let reality be the discipline for our children. Because what we tend to do as parents is we run interference for discipline. See, a child won't do their homework. And so we keep going. You have to do your homework, you have to do your homework, you have to do your homework. And then we do the homework for them. And then the child learns, hey, I just figured something out. If I just listen to mom for 25 minutes, she will do my homework. That's a good trade. Until they get to college. And then it's like, well, I don't know how to write a paper. Well, how did you get through high school? Oh, my mom helped me. And then, instead of it being the child fighting reality, it turns into the child thinking his fight is with mom. If she would just stop being on my case, everything would be good. And so mom steps between the child and reality and puts herself in the line of fire. And then the child thinks it's a mother-child problem. Same thing with dads. So what we need to do is say, son, daughter, your homework is due. You know that it's due. You know how to do it. If you need help, I am available to help you, but this is your responsibility. Because it's a lot easier to learn these things. See, it's a lot easier to fail at 5 than it is at 25. Because at 5, your consequences are like Mrs. Wilcox will say, no, Johnny, that isn't H. That's a T. Let's show you an H again. But if your parents kind of protect you, and then you're 25, all of a sudden you're like, yeah, they fired me. How come? Because I only came to work 2 times last week. Can you believe it? Like, well, actually, yeah. You have to go to your job every day. It's not like an optional thing. But people who don't have to face reality as they're growing up, it hits them pretty hard when they become an adult. And so somehow we allow reality, just like God does when he disciplines us as his children, we allow reality to be in the way. And I don't always know how to do that. I mean, it's tricky and it's complicated. And we have to think through it. But I would say, in whatever way we can, we need to allow our children to feel the full weight of the consequences of their decisions and not run interference. If they get in trouble at school, we don't go and yell at the teacher. I know my little Johnny wouldn't do that. No, we say, well, now, we also have to protect, because if there is you understand. It's just the idea we don't run interference, because that's how God disciplines us, and it's how we should discipline our children. We teach what we know, we reproduce who we are, and we prepare them for reality. In fact, I heard a quote once, and I thought it was really good. It said, parents shouldn't try to make the road for our children smooth. We should teach our children how to handle bumpy roads. Because all of their life, there's going to be bumpy roads. Now, about dads, another thing. We're kind of taught that men shouldn't be too emotional. You know, the old joke where there's the young couple and they're like, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And there's the wife, and she says to her husband, how come you don't tell me you love me? He said, when we got married 50 years ago, I said I loved you. If I change my mind, I'll let you know. We are created as emotional beings, and our emotions aren't wrong. Now, if we let them run our lives, if they get out of control, if they become our guide, but we are to feel them, we are to know them. In fact, it's part of the joy of life. And in Thessalonians, the Apostle Paul is talking about what he did. And he says in 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 11 and 12, for you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children. And you say, well, how does a father deal with his own children? Is he cold and stoic? Does he neglect them? And he says, we were encouraging, comforting, and urging you. Think about those 3 words. And I know a lot of you probably didn't feel these 3 things from your dad. But imagine a home where you were encouraged, and you were comforted, and you were urged to good. Encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. That's what the Father does. He encourages, and he comforts, and he urges us to live lives worthy of God. If we can do that, and it doesn't matter how old, because parents are the pride of their children till the end. In fact, I've seen quite a few men that are quite a bit older than me, and when their father passes away, they cry because it's a loss. It's a deep loss because their pride is gone. But I also want to acknowledge that a lot of dads have never measured up. And I'm not trying to be mean to dads, I'm just telling you what is true. They get in this cycle where they feel like I can never be the pride. And so they vacate this dearly needed. And the words that a child so desperately needs to hear, whether they're 4 or 14 or 24 or 60, they never hear. And that is the truly wonderful thing about our Father in heaven. Because he wants to be our Father in heaven. He leaves the choice up to us. We get to decide. But he longs to be our Father in heaven. He loves with a love that is so high and wide and long and deep, we will never understand it. He sent our big brother Jesus to crucify our sin in his flesh so that we could be free. He demonstrated his love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And when he adopts us as children, we have a new Father, an unbroken, unblemished, perfect Father. And he reparents us. He reparents us. He says, my ways are not your ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. And then he gives us a whole book of his thoughts. And he says, here's some wisdom. Learn these words. Learn my ways. And wherever you are in life, it's not too late. It's not too late for you to redeem the relationship with your children. And it's certainly not too late for you to be reparented by your Father in heaven, because he encourages and he comforts and he urges us to live a life worthy of him. Let's pray. Father, I just ask you to heal and to comfort, to restore, to teach us to be what you created us to be. Help us to be like you, to love as you loved, to be patient as you are patient, to be kind, gentle, forgiving. May your will be done in our lives. May we bring about your kingdom here on earth. And I know one day, one glorious day, there will be no more mourning or sorrow or strife or tears. And God himself, it says, that you will wipe away every tear. But until that day, I just ask you to please parent us. In your name, Jesus, for your kingdom and your glory, we pray. Amen.